Hello, I'm Dr. Joel Wallacha, and we're going to discuss longevity today. Since before written history, human beings have wanted to live a long, healthful life, and the technology, of course, has not improved a whole lot. The United States itself does not set a very good example. Even though we spend more money for health care than all the other nations in the world put together, right now we rank 26th in the world. There's actually 25 other industrialized nations whose peoples live longer than we do. We spend approximately $1.8 trillion, that's with a T, $1.8 trillion for health care. That's more than half the entire world's annual expenditure for health care, $2.7 trillion, and we rank 26th in longevity. 25 other industrialized nations whose peoples live longer than us. The obvious question is, who's number one and what do they do differently from us? Well, the Japanese are legendary for doing everything wrong according to Western doctors. The Japanese actually smoke 3 to 5 packs of cigarettes a day. 63% of the Japanese smoke 3 to 5 packs of cigarettes a day, yet they have 85% less cancer and 85% less cardiovascular disease than we do. The Japanese are heavy salt users. They consume 12 to 15 grams of salt a day. We're supposed to consume less than 1 gram of salt a day, yet they have 85% less cardiovascular disease than we do, and they do not have a spoken word for hypertension or high blood pressure. The Japanese, when they're speaking Japanese in a medical meeting, they're speaking Japanese and then they come to hypertension. They speak in Japanese and they say hypertension and then they go back to speaking Japanese. They do not have a spoken word for high blood pressure or hypertension because it is so rare amongst them. Yet they have 85% less cardiovascular disease and hypertension than we do. We dropped 2 atomic bombs on the Japanese to end the Second World War. They've had more radiation per person than any other culture on earth, yet they have 85% less cancer than we do. So what's their secret? Why do they do everything wrong? Why do they have so many problems and yet live longer than anybody else in the world? We're going to talk about that in a second. Right now I want to continue with the concept why over the years, even though we spend so much money, Americans don't do a very good job of longevity. In fact, when you look at the peoples over time who've had the best longevity, the longest longevity, these are people who tend to be not industrialized nations. These are people who are from third world countries. And it's very simple reasoning. Over the years, human beings have supplemented with raw materials to maintain and repair their bodies. And most people ask me this question, Doc, come on, you're talking about supplements for health and longevity. What did people do 100 years ago? What did people do in Bible times, in the times of Jesus, and in the time of Moses? What about the thousands of years before Moses? What did people do? They couldn't have supplemented. Well, they in fact did. The common fuel of the time was wood, and there's a byproduct of burning wood for heating and cooking. That byproduct is ashes. The byproduct is ashes, and the ashes are simply minerals that are left when you burn away the carbon in the fuel. The ashes are the minerals that are left when you burn away the carbon in the fuel. Well, these wood ashes, these minerals, were put into gardens as a fertilizer. We know this from anthropological and archaeological studies going back before written history. And they were used as fertilizer. The grains, vegetables, fruits, and nuts would take up the minerals from the wood ashes. And, of course, people would then eat the grains, vegetables, fruits, and nuts, and they got minerals in that way. People also added the wood ash, known as potash, P-O-T-A-S-H, potash, which came from their cooking fires, into the food, known amongst anthropologists as culinary ashes, and so people got minerals that way. And then salt in the old days, before the times of Moses, were salt was very expensive, regardless of what type of salt it was very expensive. People would trade an ounce of gold for an ounce of salt, and nobody just used salt straight because it was so expensive. They would actually mix the potash or wood ashes from their heating and cooking fires to cut the salt 10 to 1, 100 to 1. They'd mix it up very carefully. Then that's what they would sprinkle on their food as a seasoning, not just straight salt. And so people did get mineral supplements since before recorded history. When you look at the people yet today in the 20th and 21st centuries, the people who live the longest tend to be from third world countries. There has never been a professional athlete. There's never been a professional athlete ever live to be 100. There's never been a Nobel Prize winner live to be 100. There's never been a billionaire live to be 100. There's never been a vegan, a vegetarian who eats nothing but grains, vegetables, fruits, and nuts live to be 100. So we know that being, in the terms of a vegan, spiritually elevated, and we know that being rich, and we know that being very, very smart and physically fit are not the answers in of itself to longevity. So what are the common threads between people who live beyond 100? Again, they tend to be from third world countries. They tend to be furthest from what we consider to be important and absolutely necessary health care. They come from places that do not have hospitals and clinics and doctors. They come from places who do not have pharmacies, pharmacists, and pharmaceuticals. They come from places where they're still using wood as fuel, and they're using the wood ashes in their gardens as culinary ashes and to cut their salt. This is a common thread, regardless of what country they come from, regardless of what religion they are, regardless of anything else they do. This is the common thread. So we know that we need raw materials. We have an animal model for this. We know from animal studies that, and these have been done, by the way, since the 1920s. These animal studies were first done by Clive McKay from Cornell University in the 1920s. And what he found was that if he kept the vitamins and minerals high in an animal's diet, but cut the carbohydrate calories, they could actually double lifespans. And people who are gerontologists tend to forget keeping the vitamins and minerals high. They tend to forget that. They tend to look at not only keeping the carbohydrates down, but they forget the part about keeping the vitamins and minerals high. They talk about a restricted calorie diet. And that's fine, but you have to keep the vitamins and minerals up. It's called undernutrition without malnutrition, is the original Clive McKay thinking from the 1920s. And as long as we do that, as long as we keep the calories down from carbohydrates and the vitamins and minerals up, we're more likely to live to be 100 in a healthful way. And so it's built on things that we can do. Longevity is built upon things that we can do. Many people will tell you, look, I've got good genes. All my parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles lived to be 98, 100, 102, and so I'm not going to worry about it. The odds are I'm going to live to be 100. That's not quite true. We all have the genes. Every human being on Earth has the genes to live to be well beyond 100. However, we have to take in the raw materials to make it. It doesn't matter if all your family members live to be 100. If you do not take in the raw materials and you're living on empty foods that haven't had wood ashes put back on the gardens as a source of getting minerals back, and you're not supplementing one or the other or both, you're in trouble. And no matter how good a genes you have, the odds of you living to be 100 are pretty slim. During the time you do live, you're going to have a miserable life. You're going to wind up with a bunch of degenerative diseases that have resulted from not having enough vitamins and minerals. These, of course, these nutrients are called essential nutrients because we cannot make them. Our bodies cannot make them. We must consume them every day, either as food or as supplements. That's what they're called, essential nutrients. Also, if you don't have enough of them, depending on which one it is, maybe a day, a week, a month, a year, the odds are you're not going to live to be 100. For instance, potassium, we cannot store potassium in our body, and so you must consume your daily need for potassium every day because we can't store it. And if you don't have enough potassium, after a day or two you start getting a regular heartbeat and your heart will stop, and you will have a very short life if you don't take in enough potassium. So these are things you have to appreciate, very simple things if you want to live to be 100. You have to consciously consume all 90 essential nutrients so our body can maintain and repair itself, and you have to, in fact, make sure that you're staying away from the bad stuff. That's equally important. To stay away from the bad stuff is taking in all the good stuff. Now, if you do this, take in all the good stuff, stay away from the bad stuff, which include free radicals, which come from fried foods, margarines, cooking oils, burnt meats, and we'll talk about those in detail another day. But if you stay away from the bad things that produce, either directly or indirectly, free radicals, and then you supplement properly with all the basic raw materials we need to maintain and repair itself, the odds are that you will live well beyond 100. The animal data shows this. The data from third world countries, interestingly enough, shows this. And it's always been a head scratcher for people in the ivory towers of academics why people in third world countries